All right, let's go back to Jeff. Let's get some questions now.
All right.
What do we have waiting for us?
Well, we've got a lot of exciting things over here. We actually have a, let's see, actually this is interesting. We have a math midpoint formula question. Mm-hmm. Now, this is from a very famous person, but it says here, a line on a graph has 2 points of 1, 2, and 6 and 5. Using the midpoint formula, find a point halfway between.
Yeah, I can take that one. Right now, I'm actually just pulling up a graph, so I don't have to try to draw one because it gets a little messy. So let me see if I can do that really quick. So we can talk a little bit about what the midpoint formula is, how we apply it, and kind of see what that looks like visually. So I can do this. Okay. So right now, I've got a graph on my screen. So we're saying that a line has 2 points of 1, 2.
1, 2.
So I'm going to say 1, 2 is right here, right? Because 1 is my x-coordinate. Let me write this down. 1, 2, and 6, 5. And we want to find the midpoint. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So we got this point right here, 1, 2, and we got this point right here, 6, 5. And we're saying that a line of a graph has these 2 points, and we want to find the midpoint or halfway between.
Yeah, we want to find point halfway in between.
All right, so let's think about what this looks like. It's not a great line. I'm going to freehand this one. Okay, so we can say, remember, lines go forever, so I'm going to just kind of extend this. But we want to know what point is exactly in the middle between this point here and this point here. So you can kind of guess it's probably, you would maybe guess it's around here. And the reason why I'm going to guess kind of so we can show you where this formula comes from, I think when you look at midpoint formula, a lot of times it looks like it's this complicated formula, but actually what you're going to see is it's really just a couple averages. So if you think about this, if I wanted to find the midpoint between, let's say on a number line, I wanted to find the midpoint between the number 1 right here and the number 6, right? You know it'd be somewhere in between here. You could do some calculations and you're going to get 3.5. So what we're doing when we're trying to find the midpoint is really we're trying to find the average because we're trying to split it up evenly into 2 equal segments. So what we're really doing is saying 6 plus 1 is 7 divided by 2 is 3.5 because that is an average of those 2 points, 6 and 1. Right? If you took 2 tests and they were, let's say they're out of 6 points to make you feel a little bit better, and one of them you got a 6, the other one you got a 1, and you want to know what your average score was, you would just add them together and divide them by 2. So if we look at the midpoint formula, you have something like this. And again, when I show this to students, they often are a little bit intimidated because it looks really confusing. But if we kind of think about what you're doing, it's a little bit more straightforward. So what we're really doing is we're saying, okay, we have these 2 coordinates, x, y here, right? And we have these 2 coordinates here, or x and y here. So we have 2 sets of coordinates. We want to find the middle. In order to find the middle of those, we really want to find the average of the x-coordinates and the average of the y-coordinates because that's going to give us what is exactly in the middle. So one thing that I notice, and you may notice this too, Becca, like this x sub 1 throws a lot of students
that
off.
One,
right?
they don't like that number there.
And especially this x sub 2, a lot of times it's confused with like, oh, was that x squared?
Right.
That's what throws everybody off. Now,
Notation.
I want you to think about like, what we have here is we have 2 x-coordinates and we have 2 y-coordinates. So if we didn't put these little sub-notations in there, it would be confusing. Like, I don't know which one I'm talking about.
Which x?
Yeah.
Right.
So all this means is the first x-coordinate, right, would be this one, and the second x-coordinate is this one. So it's just a notation to differentiate those coordinates.
It's like a label.
Yeah,
Which
exactly.
Which x are we talking about?
Right. And so what we could do if you wanted to is you could say, like, let's call this my first x-coordinate, and let's call this my second x-coordinate, and let's call this my first y-coordinate, and let's call this my second y-coordinate. And again, all you're really doing is thinking about, like, what is the average of the x-coordinates? So if I know that my x sub 1 is 1 right here, then I'm going to say 1 plus my second coordinate, which is 6, divided by 2. You could leave it in this form like this. And then we do the same thing. Like, let's find the average between our y coordinates. Well, y sub 1 is right here, which we had a value of 2, plus y sub 2, which is 5. And we're going to find the average of those coordinates, and then we're just going to simplify this. So 1 plus 6 is 7, 7 divided by 2. And 2 plus 5 is 7 also, so 7 divided by 2. And depending on what your teacher wants, I prefer to leave things in fraction form. But a lot of times when you're graphing on a coordinate plane, it might be easier to kind of estimate where it should be at by putting it in decimal. So 3.5, 3.5. So we can kind of see, we guessed that the coordinate would be right around here. Now we can kind of verify that. See if I can erase this. There we go. Too much. We can kind of verify that and say, like, that should be about where it is. So if I count to the right, 1, 2, 3, and then like half a space here, you kind of notice I'm right in the middle. If I were to kind of sketch this line, I'm kind of right in the middle there of those two for the x-coordinate. Same thing goes if I want to do the y-coordinate. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3.5. I'm like right about here. So that is the point that's directly in the middle of both of those coordinates. So again, midpoint formula, whenever you just look at it, if you don't really think about what's happening, it looks confusing because there's like all these weird notations like x sub 1, x sub 2, and then there's like this formula that's got, you know, parentheses and a lot happening. But if you just think about it as midpoint is like the average of the x coordinates and the average of the y coordinates, it becomes a little bit more, I think, manageable and makes a little bit more sense.
It really does. Yeah, I always forget what it is, and then but when you think about if you're just doing the average, then it
Right.
always comes back. Yeah. Definitely good pointers there. Especially, I'm glad that you mentioned about the subscript on the x's because I noticed it all the time.
Yeah.
Can be confusing.
And it's really important to like write. I see students write x squared or x with a big 2.
Right.
It gets a little confusing if you don't have the notation down.
It's so true.